Okie dokie. So, hey everyone, Vlad and Chris here. We welcome everyone who joined us this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you guys are. Today we have a bit of a special episode in our series. We're going to be talking to Chris, the co-founder and CEO of GoodCourse, the project about which Chris is going to give us much more details. It's an educational project, and it's actually a lot of things. It's a revolutionary project in terms of the education. It has a very interesting approach to how the education is going to be delivered to people and how to make it even more accessible to more people, as well as the interesting part to us and to this particular audience that the project has been built with no code. The project has been built within, I think, there has been a portion of the process that has been founded by the venture capital, and we have been humbly helping Chris, at least for the part of the journey that Chris and his co-founder Omar have traveled so far in building the solution. So there are a lot of things to discuss, a lot of insights. So without further ado, I welcome Chris. Chris, good evening. How are you doing today?
Hey, Vlad, yeah, really good, thanks. How are you?
Very good. There's a lot of things that we want to get started from, I'm sure. So we're highly encouraging the audience to also share what are the questions that me and Chris should go over and then touch upon that are interesting to you. Pretty much anything, starting from getting the idea together, finding a co-founder, all over to defining what the first version of the application should be, and as well as, why no code and how to build the right MVP. So, but let's start from the very beginning. So Chris, GoodCourse, what is it all about? How did the idea appear in your minds, and how did it transform to what GoodCourse is right now?
Yeah, of course. So GoodCourse, my co-founder and I, Omar, used to work together at a different kind of venture-backed startup. And whilst working there, actually, we kind of found the problem we were looking to solve with GoodCourse. So really around how e-learning is built for knowledge workers, the likes of us on this call who work at computers as part of our day-to-day jobs. Yet about 80% of the workforce aren't computer-based. They are frontline staff, so to speak, those who are out and about doing various often manual jobs. And for them, learning is not accessible, it's not engaging, and it takes way too long to fit into a schedule often packed by the hour. So GoodCourse essentially is a mobile-based micro-learning solution that enables HR, L&D leaders to engage their audiences by delivering really engaging micro-learning content. So 3 minutes a day for 4 or 5 days is a typical structure in our world, with all that content delivered straight to a learner's phone via text message. So that's kind of the crux of the problem we're trying to solve, and I guess the kind of outline of the solution there.
Awesome. So who came up with the idea that the learning is best delivered via mobile phone and via text in particular?
That's a good question, and it was me or Omar. I'm actually not exactly sure who first kind of concluded that, but I'd say the way we think about things often at GoodCourse is not really about solutions and features, it's much more about problems and needs. Right. So if we think about, let's say, the kind of frontline worker or remote audiences who have little access to computers, where brevity is really important, where friction often causes lack of engagement. So if you ask, let's say your frontline workers as a retail company for your, you hire new shop floor staff every 6 months, probably asking them to download an L&D app and not forget your password, right, et cetera, all steps that basically add friction to the process. Mm-hmm. We basically realized through understanding the problems and the needs really effectively that the solution needed to be something that was really concise, but also had no friction involved to engage with content. And that's where text as a channel is universal on all phones, but also all we need a learner to have is literally a smartphone and a phone number. We don't rely on them to do anything to receive the content otherwise. So that's kind of how we concluded text as opposed to thought of text, if that makes sense.
Pretty cool. Actually, I'm amazed that there has not been a lot of other examples that have utilized this channel, which is pretty much ubiquitous, right? Everyone has a phone, everyone has a phone number. Almost 100% of people in most countries have access to the mobile phone and the text messaging service. So that's a pretty good outreach strategy. So there's usually a lot of first-time founders or starters, people that are just, starting early on their journey, that are always wondering what to do next. So what was your kind of sequence of action? So you found out the problem, that it's a pain to deliver the learning experience to like a lot of people who may not necessarily have an access to a computer, or otherwise there's a lot of friction in them actually doing the work. So what happened next? So let's say you had a concept of the application in your mind. So what was the next step, and what were the biggest challenges?
Sorry, it lags slightly at the end there, but I think I'm back in the room now. But so next steps can identifying the problem, then kind of what comes next. So I guess I'll touch briefly on no code, etc., as it's now relevant to the journey. But we basically realized that to build our MVP very effectively and very quickly, doing it in a no-code solution let us cut basically a lot of the time and effort involved compared to building it fully in code. So that enabled us to get to the very first version of our products pretty quickly. And once that skeletal light version was ready, we then did a lot of outreach work. So actually trying to basically start buyers, L&D, HR directors at companies with this problem of reaching their kind of frontline workers. And that let us very quickly validate what pains in more detail they're facing, but also crucially how effective this style of delivery and this solution was. And that was done, obviously it's an ongoing process, but the first version of that, or first round of that, was done before we built anything in too much detail. And that's crucial because we didn't have to spend a year in deep tech mode, lots of money, lots of time on technology. Right. Actually, we can get the basic version out first, get feedback, get basically more confidence that this style of delivery and approach has a lot of potential, and then start incrementally growing our feature set and our platform off the back of that.
Pretty cool. That's a nice segue to the no code component of our conversation. Definitely, it is a great tool to validate the ideas fast and then polish the strategy and then the application to make sure you're actually delivering what the target audience wants. But even for people who are familiar with no code, which I assume that a lot of people listening to this one right now are, it can be a challenge for people to decide, okay, what to build first. So let's say some people are getting stuck on building a landing page. The other people may be spending time and money and efforts overall to build some features which may not necessarily be the first priority ones or super critical ones. How did you guys solve this issue? So how did you decide that, okay, let's say feature number 1, 2, and 3 are top priority for us, and this is what we want to get started with?
Yeah, of course. We wanted to validate our MVP. We wanted to basically be in a place where an outside observer glancing at us very quickly, we looked fairly credible, fairly not like we're some very early stage startup who, basically are trying to get feedback on a thing that's not built yet. So website, right. Definitely that's one of the things that was a must have. So we made sure that our first version of the site looked fairly clean, fairly decent. It's not obviously the best thing in the world at that stage, but it definitely looks kind of like a legitimate website. And then product wise, I think focusing on the experience you want an early stage potential customer to actually view and experience, that's the part that needs to be at least reasonable. Everything else can be fairly ugly and messy, or even back-end focus at that stage. So for us, for example, we've got a micro-learning course, and that goes to a learner straight to their phone via text. We've also got our platform where you can author content. Now, in the early days, the platform wasn't so important because actually in early stage conversations, we weren't doing deep platform authoring sessions with our clients. Actually, It was more about the learning experience. So actually we focus on making sure delivering content via text with a bit of video content in there too, for example, was what we got to initially, which wasn't an awful lot, but it was enough that when we had our first conversations, we could finish a call like this, Vlad, let's say you and I, as if you're an L&D director, and the next step would be actually you can try out a micro learning course and we can send that to your phone via text and you can have the actual experience. Now, the platform behind that wasn't really mature and built at all, but it was enough to obviously say you can see and feel the experience, and we can hear your feedback crucially on how you found that style of learning. So basically enough to show almost the top level value for the problem you're solving, but there's no need to build like an enterprise ready SaaS product end to end at that stage, unless you've got the money and the appetite to do so, of course.
Even definitely I can't stress that enough. Even if you do have the money and the appetite to build that, you probably shouldn't do that at the very first stage. And I can't thank you enough for for summing it up so nicely. So basically, you focused on something that would be valuable and important for a customer to take a decision to try out the solution, and did just that initially, and leaving everything else pretty much in a good shape for it to work, but not necessarily impress everyone, because that's not what would make or break the deciding factor basically for people to getting on your application. Pretty good. Right. So that we were focusing on the product and the vision for how you were building it, but I'm guessing that a lot of people realize on the way that actually building a product is a part of the problem that the let's say early stage founders are facing. So you were saying you were reaching out to people and speaking to the decision makers and the people who may be potentially interested about your solution. So how exactly did you find these people? Were they within your network, or did you do some outreach? What was your basically early customer acquisition strategy?
Sure. I think this could be a webinar series in itself, this topic actually, but so most of my background
Totally.
is at B2B SaaS startups and companies. So, and that's often been in a sales and business development focused roles as well. So most of my kind of professional background prior to founding GoodCourse was really around how you build a pipeline of potential clients, how you run really effective sales processes, and basically onboard hopefully very happy customers using your products. So for us, yeah, a lot of outreach essentially. So you can use a mixture of automation tools. We use HubSpot, for example, that basically lets you really effectively, using that plus data gathering tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and other kind of sources of data, you can find, let's say, your target potential buyers at the companies you want to be working with, and then you can use automation tools to help you reach out across, email, video, LinkedIn, cold calling, etc. Things that get you the conversation started with really effective messaging that's going to resonate with them as well.
Pretty good. So you were doing both the outreach in your network and also completely outside of it by using the common tools such as LinkedIn, and then going through the CRM and then the outreach tools, automating essentially the funnel for reaching out to your customers. Correct. Pretty good. Were you targeting the one-to-one conversation primarily, or did you have some, let's say, content that would help them to kind of test the solution out, or read something that would give them a better idea? Or was always the one-to-one conversation the target for the outreach?
We'd often target one-to-one conversations up front. If someone expressed some interest, but let's say they weren't keen to jump on an intro call straight away, we had a few kind of like nice looking summary slides and decks that we could share that kind of like capture the problem and almost tease what the solution could be, but hopefully leave them wanting more and therefore eager to come to a call to discuss more.
That's awesome. Thank you. People don't realize how important that is, and what kind of a grind that could be, because people are saying, okay, I've built the product, now they should come, and that's not always the case. And if usually people are surprisingly finding themselves spending much more time on actually reaching out to people and talking to them rather than building a product. So I'm happy that it looks like you had an advantage, Chris, being an expert in that kind of thing. So good for you guys. Yeah. All right. So another important discovery. So while you were talking to your customers, and obviously you didn't have some idea of what you're doing because you personally faced that issue on your job together with Omar. So you had some idea about the direction of how the product should look like and how it should work. Did you actually iterate a lot or pivot in some shape and form initially from what the first version of the product and first idea of the product was supposed to be, and where it was, let's say, midway, and where it is right now, and what led to that?
Yeah, definitely, to answer your question, and that process is one that we hope will never stop either. I'd hate to think that in a year's time we do exactly the same things we do right now. That means we spent a year not getting any better, so that wouldn't be very good. But yeah, in terms of iteration, looking back, so in our world then, and I appreciate everyone on the call isn't obviously in our worlds of micro learning system design, but the two core challenges we're solving for, as we now know better than we did a year and a half back, is one around accessibility. So how you make learning content accessible to those who typically don't have computers or perhaps are too busy to engage with longer form e-learning content. And two is engagement, how you make learning content hyper engaging, enjoyable to do, and therefore improve the rate at which people actually consume the content that's shared. Now, the first version of our product was simply delivering text message content, as in literally just written text in a text message, and that's it. Vlad, you know what our product looks like today, and you know that's probably quite different to what, what it is today.
Very.
You can confirm that. And that version of our product, even back then though, got really good feedback on the accessibility points. It was really easy to receive a text with some content, but it wasn't very engaging to, unsurprisingly, read through a long text and that's it. The second version then was us upskilling on using video creation tools to have texts that have, yes, some written content, but also links to kind of like short form videos that are quite engaging as part of that day's content. And the third iteration, which we're on to now, which obviously had your team, Vlad, helping out with the more technical elements for sure, is around then hyper engaging learning experiences using what's called a progressive web app design. So essentially it looks and feels like a mobile app, but it's actually in your browser on Safari or Chrome. And yeah, you kind of host all your engaging content, be it videos, text, images, GIFs, audio files, etc., in a kind of mobile app like experience, but that's still delivered via text message. So yeah, that's kind of been the iterations so far. And I would shudder to look back at what we did a year and a half back and think that was that was very well on track, because it's a long way from today, that's for sure.
Pretty cool. Yeah, so the first version was just text messages, then you enhanced it with some media, and then the current version, I don't want to say the last version, because it's definitely a lot of discovery still to be done. It is basically a fully multimedia rich content that is still viewed on your phone. So the motto is still there, accessible for everyone, but it also has like a variety of different engaging elements, such as text, video, audio, and basically a two-way communication between the person and the application. That's definitely that escalated quickly from simple text messages in over a year time. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the building process, because you guys have actually, when we were first talking a few months ago, you guys were actually having a fully fledged application that you have developed together with your co-founder, which is pretty impressive for people coming from let's say, technical background to the no-code development. So taking a few more steps back. So how did you discover Bubble? Why did you pick Bubble as a no-code solution of choice? Because there may have been other options. I assume that you may have checked them, like a few of them out. So how did you pick Bubble, and then we'll go from there, because there's definitely a lot of questions about your discovery and the learning process here.
Yeah, of course. I think choosing kind of why no code and why Bubble. So why no code, I guess initially almost by force of the fact that neither of us co-founders come from technical coding backgrounds, meant that by definition we couldn't do it in code unless we were to spend a lot of time upskilling or hire someone externally, neither of which were without appealing options at the time. So kind of concluded that we should give this a try in no code, and Bubble was the standout option, just I guess feature comparison and also community maturity. Bubble seemed to have the biggest kind of community around it, which often provides a lot of kind of resources, help, guidance, etc. To people who are trying to upskill. That's obviously pretty valuable stuff as well. So that was why we kind of included Bubble.
Right. So you're actually another great example of something that we frequently promote, building and getting a head start with a template. So you guys ended up starting to build the first version of the application from one of our templates. Which is a great thing in and out of itself. But how did that choice affect the process, and why did you decide to go with a template, and where did it go from there? So why not build from scratch? Why a template?
Yeah, of course. I think when we came back to the beginning and started building our first version of the application, obviously both of us being new to Bubble as well, thankfully my background in particular is kind of somewhat technical. It's not coding, but I've done a lot of kind of econometrics, game theory type stuff academically, which is kind of relatively technical, logic based work. Right. So kind of, I guess, translates in some way to this kind of world, thankfully. But yeah, kind of how we came to using a template and what that did for us. So we basically realized that Bubble is a very powerful tool, particularly if you're not building hugely deep tech. Obviously, it needs to be a very slick and working platform, but it's not like you're building some intensely advanced machine learning algorithms, for example, right? Given that, then the real crux issue was, how do we build this database and backend structure to actually do what we need it to do, excuse me, sorry, for our particular courses and our particular platform and features? That was a thing that was more unique to us, whereas actually having a platform that has, you know, a billing page, a profile page, a dashboard page, etc., etc. Yes, obviously in the end, that's still unique to us in some ways, but most platforms nowadays have those core pages, right, and have that kind of core similarity of structure. And that's where it felt very natural to think, well, why don't we focus on upskilling on the back end parts that are unique to us, and actually use someone like Zeroqode's very great and easy to use templates to actually shortcut our growth and learning on the front end and UI side of things, basically, right? So rather than do that all from scratch, we could just take one of your templates, obviously edit some stuff, shape it as we need to, but a lot of the blocks, iconography, UI design, you know, all that stuff is already kind of giving you a handrail on, basically.
Pretty cool. So coming back to what you said initially about working and focusing on what's most important to your end users, the template kind of complements that, right? So you already have something that you can start with without spending a ton of time on building this all from the ground up, while what your major, you know, portion of effort should be around is actually building the features that are important to your users. And basically the person will not be using your platform if the profile page or dashboard page is better than the next one. They're all pretty much, you know, as long as they're taking care of the main purpose, they're all right. But the amount of time you have to spend for these elements sometimes is comparable to building the core of the application itself. So looks like, if I understand you correctly, the template helped you guys to focus on something that was important for you to validate first, while taking care of the rest on the initial stage.
Exactly that.
All right. Pretty good. And obviously, later on, the application will and may and should go to a lot of different directions, because looking at the what application looks like right now, it's totally different from what the template was initially. So it's not a limited factor in any way, from what I can tell. So that's good stuff as well. We actually have a question from someone from the audience about kind of the plan, because we were speaking about web app mostly, but there's a question about, you know, the mobile experience, I guess, if I so to say. Well, let me read that out. So can you talk more about the web app versus putting your app on iOS and Android stores? I assume I found users had a difficult time placing the web app on their phone. I've built an app and gave users the instructions how to place it on their phone, and this caused some friction. So what's your take on that, Chris? I guess your case is a little unique to placing apps on phones, because it's kind of being delivered to their phones to begin with. But what's your take on that? Mobile versus web?
It's a good question. I suppose, as you say, Vad, our take is kind of focused on our world, the problem we're solving, and I guess the build of our solution. So we have kind of two types of users. As you'll know, Vad, I ruthlessly describe them as users and learners. So users for us is someone who's logged into our web application on a computer. They're someone who's building a course. They're an L&D or an HR person at a company who's kind of using our platform. They're the buying power really behind the platform. The learner is someone who receives our courses to their phone via text message. Now, in our world, the web application on your computer doesn't need to be accessible on a phone, because we're not going to have an HR manager on their phone logging in, making a course. That's not a thing they're ever going to do. That's just not natural, intuitive, and we actually don't let them do it either. Currently, we block it and say you've got to do it on the computer, and that's never going to get any complaints from any customers for a long time, because you just wouldn't build like a e-learning course on the go on your phone. No. I guess the more interesting one is then the learner experience, obviously in our world, is mobile based. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we really care about friction. So the reason why we don't want to have a mobile app is we don't want to have learners having to go somewhere, the app store, downloading an app, creating a login, don't forget your password, all that kind of stuff. We don't want to go through the process. So what we've actually done is, and that was obviously part of what Zeroqode helped us with for the more technical side of our most recent version of the platform, is created a page of our app, a web page that looks and feels like a mobile app, but it Absolutely is not. You follow a link that you get via text message on your phone, it takes you to Safari or to Chrome. It looks and feels like a mobile app, but it's not. It's a web page that's hyper responsive and looks and feels like one. So we actually don't use any mobile apps natively, and we don't plan to anytime soon either. And that's deliberately to remove any friction for the learner experience, which is those who are viewing it on their phones.
That's a great point, actually, that a lot of people don't really consider, like in full length, that a lot of functions that are available on, let's say, desktop or web applications have absolutely no need to be available on mobile phones. Like you said, for instance, some people are spending a lot of time and effort to make some dashboards or some admin functionality available on mobile phones, which is completely useless, because people will not be using that. People will not be using difficult, building difficult workflows or otherwise working with intricate settings of their applications while they're on the run and while they're using their smartphone. They will be doing that whenever they're stationary on their desktops. And features which do make sense to be available on mobiles are, in most of the cases, different from features that should be available on both desktop and let's say larger screens would be a better term. So, and speaking about the friction, that's also a great point. So any additional overhead action step like downloading an application is definitely additional friction, and quite a major one. So there should be some absolute value in why people should actually be using your solution on the phone, for them to go all the way and go through all those hoops of authentication, download, and whatnot of your application. So especially for people who are starting up and then validating their ideas, in most of the cases, with very few exceptions, mobile application is actually an overhead and a hassle more than it's adding to the value to the user and then overall to the learning curve. So looks like, Chris, your example is as a perfect explanation why people would be happy with something that is easily available right on their phone without any extra steps necessary to do that, to download it or anything. Okay, that's great. So coming back to your building experience, so you chose Bubble, you got a template, and you built the first version of your application, which was running pretty good. When we first took a look at it, it was very impressive to us. So at which point of time do you consider that you would need some help from an agency, and how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, of course. I think for anyone on the session now who's a founder or soon to be founder at the early stages, I think what I'll say before how you consider when to kind of bring in expert help on certain topics is really around the importance as a founder of upskilling on things. I think it's too easy to think sometimes that you can pay for someone else to do this and that's it solved, because chances are, whatever it is, be it technical, legal, operational, finance, sales, whatever it is, you're going to need to change that again and again and again. And if you as a founder don't have a decent understanding at the base level of what you're doing, it's going to be very time consuming and costly to keep changing that thing. So the way we viewed it with this mindset with Bubble, for example, was actually, for as long as we could, keep building the next thing we needed to build by using our own existing skill and then self upskilling using forums, YouTube videos, manuals, guides, etc. For as long as we could keep doing that, that was the only way to go, because we were learning in the process and ourselves being able to then change things going forwards. Then when it came to the most recent version where we wanted to build this progressive web app experience, that in reality was really the point where we realized, okay, this is now so specific that there isn't really much guidance online as to how to do this in Bubble. And it is very technical and a thing that is outside of our skill sets right now. Mine in particular as the one who does more of the technical side of things in Bubble. And that's where actually we thought, right, this is where we now we've exhausted how far we can go ourselves with relative ease and using online resources. So actually now we need to pick the best provider, best supplier, best partner we can to basically help us with that next bit, but also upskill us in the process, so that once that next bit's done, we're obviously glad we got on very well, but we don't want to be reliant on you guys for any small tweak. And equally, you probably don't want that either. It's not very helpful for you, right? So that was really important for us too, to have someone who's brilliant, but also happy to take us with them on the journey, basically, as well.
Thank you. I think that's the smartest approach of all. So definitely do whatever you can yourself to get the ball rolling, if you will. And then whenever you need an upgrade or something that would take too much of your time as a founder, you obviously have a lot of balls in the air, so to say, to juggle with. So whenever it becomes too difficult for you to take the application to the next level, that's probably the best moment when to reach out and to consult to an agency or otherwise an expert in the matter. So there's a question about that let's say step of your that part of your journey about how long did it actually take you to learn Bubble adequately to build the first version of the application. We have a person listening to this series right now who's saying that she has a business design and technical background, but it's been a while since she had to code. So and then she's more on the business side of things. So she was wondering, what was your experience and how did you get into that, having some of the background, but not necessarily, let's say, it's not a coder jumping into no code or otherwise, learning a lot of things on the way. So what was the learning curve like for you guys?
Yeah, of course. So I guess whoever's asking the question, you have more coding experience than I do, so it's a good starting point. We had a couple of things. So we were still full-time employed elsewhere at the time as well, so doing this around another job, but also it was lockdown too, so we had no social life either, because everyone was in lockdown. So kind of had less time and more time, if that makes sense. It's a hard question to answer because I guess where do I kind of drop the gate of what kind of the first version looked like? Being candid, probably is something like a focused 10 to 15 hours a week for about 4 months, I'd say, roughly speaking, is like an amount of time to get to a good level of competence and able to produce like your first MVP, depending what it is. And at that point, be able to iterate that very quickly because you've upskilled yourself to a good level. That was going from a start where I had never logged into Bubble before, obviously came from a fairly technical background otherwise, but hadn't done a thing of this nature before. That's a rough idea, I'd say, of the kind of learning curve and time for us in the first phase.
What I would want to point out as well that the GoodCourse version 1 was actually not, let's say, a trivial Bubble application. So it had integrations with an external platforms. It was using a bidirectional text exchange. So it was kind of an advanced one. So I would say that a few months learning that on average a couple hours a day is actually a very decent result, and it was looking good as well. So you should take more credit for it, Chris. All right.
Thanks,
a question from me. So it's related to both building with no code experience and also a founder experience. You have a co-founder, Omar, who we don't have with us today, but is very actively engaged into the building and then validating process that we have been collaborating on. So how did you guys split the responsibilities? How did you choose, who's responsible for what, and did you iterate or change that in the process somehow?
Yeah, so I think backgrounds wise, we both have kind of professional experience on certain areas of a startup that naturally, so he's got more of a kind of ops strategy, finance backgrounds. I have a more direct sales BD background as well. So those skills were an obvious split that we haven't tweaked and changed. Things like scoping, UI, UX, front end, back end of our kind of product and technical stack is all stuff that was newer to us both, although we both had some dabblings of experience, but there was no particularly clear I guess split or different groups of things that each of us could do better. So early on we kind of both got involved across all of it, but quite fast we just found that our skill sets would kind of suit different things. Omar is more creative and a better kind of visual designer UI type person than I am, and vice versa. He'll happily say that I'm much more technical than he is. So it kind of naturally and quickly made sense that once we both got to a certain fairly low level of everything, actually at this point, let's specialize. And obviously where needed, the other one gets kind of upskilled a bit as well. But in reality, being very open with your co-founder and understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses and playing to those strengths and weaknesses is what in the end helps us get further faster, basically.
Totally. It looks like you guys have a perfect combination a person with a more technical inclination meets a person with more creative, visual, and UI UX inclination, and just by accident, they both have sales experience, which is definitely an asset for early stage founders, which is a great recipe. So great, wonderful. So I also mentioned in the beginning that GoodCourse is a great example for a lot of cases and points, and one of them being that you guys have actually raised some VC funds. So a lot of people who are sitting on a fence and also are currently en route in their no-code journey are wondering how or if let's say the no-code as a weapon of choice will affect the conversation with the VCs about financing or development. So what was the experience for you guys? So was it a plus or a minus, or was that basically not that important when it came to like defining the value and the further growth for your startup? What was the overall reaction, let's say, of VCs when you were telling that you're building a product with no code?
It's a really good question, and one that I have some fairly strong opinions on. So no code is still quite new, as we all know, and in particular for VCs who like to keep up with the trends, but no companies have gone through to IPO or anything like that, even close to using no code. That's just a fact, right? Mm-hmm. There are some more companies now at kind of our stage raising their first rounds of funding that's predominantly built in no codes. So I'd say like initially there is some resistance or surprise, or just I guess lack of familiarity, right? If you're used to backing founders who are building this solution that's going to be that company's solution that's unique to them, it being built in code and kind of IP around that, etc., is all fairly important. But actually, in reality, a couple of things: the confidence with which you can articulate the problem you're solving, but also the fact that your solution isn't necessarily like a deep tech solution. It might be obviously a very nice platform that's usable is important, but actually it's really about the value that your style of solution delivers, and then the sales and marketing engine you have around that to win clients, right? In our world, there is no benefit at this stage, at least, to being built in code versus no code, apart from the fact that in no code means we can go much faster and a much lower cost on the technical side of things. So if we take that into account, actually the fact we've managed to already win our first clients prior to our first investment building in no code clearly showed it could work to some extent. And the fact that we could then basically take that investment and spend most of it on our sales, marketing and product roadmap, and much less than usual on developers and the kind of code-based cost that comes with it. So in reality, if you articulate it well and you can back it by your initial traction, your story and your plans, actually often it can mean suddenly realizing, oh, we actually have the potential to do much more than most our stage, because we can spend a lot of money on other things that isn't just expensive developers, basically.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. I'm obviously biased, but there are more people who are sharing the exact same opinion coming from a variety of backgrounds. The one that comes to mind first is Jason Calacanis. It's actually a prominent United States-based investor. I think he has a lot of like big tech companies in his portfolio, and he's an early stage founder of a lot of, and I think even a few unicorns. And he had a conversation relatively recently with Emmanuel, the co-founder of Bubble. And one of the points he raised was that the fact that is exactly as you said, if the founder or co-founders have been able to win their first customers, show the traction, earn some money without spending a fortune or like a ton of time on hiring an expensive team of developers and skyrocketing the costs of operations, that's a definite proof that the business idea has value, it has traction, and it's worth considering. While as compared to people who are coming with nothing and then saying that, this will work, we know for sure, that there's a lot less credibility to them because, you never know. And so no code is essentially a very inexpensive way to add a ton of more credibility to your initial pitch, to show to the investors something a lot more than a PowerPoint presentation, but actually show them the real running application and then basically a functioning business in your case, which is a great point. Wonderful. So there has been a question here, which is kind of segueing me to the next topic. People are asking if you're still on Bubble, Chris. Are you still on Bubble?
Yes, we are for sure.
And what's next basically for GoodCourse? What are you guys planning? How are you planning to utilize no code both yourselves and maybe outsourcing a part of it to some other third parties? And what's in the roadmap for you guys, and then what's the process looking like right now?
Yeah, sure. So I think on the no code question, like Bubble and no code will definitely be our future for a reasonable amount of time at least. In terms of our kind of longer term feature roadmap, there are some things we've got in mind that we know will face limitations in our current kind of options set within Bubble. That said, though, obviously Bubble themselves are growing all the time as well, and they're also a much more bigger startup than us, but they are still a startup as well. So our kind of hope is that, you know, this time in a year from now, Bubble will have advanced sufficiently that actually the things we might need between now and then are actually incorporated into their feature set as well. So that's one to bear in mind, that, you know, even if you're thinking of an idea right now that needs all these amazing things, in the end, if that's 4 years from now, okay, it doesn't matter, like focus on the next 6-12 months more than what you need in 4 years time. So that's one thing just to note in terms of that. I think things that we're thinking about right now in terms of like what our early stage clients need and the things that you know, in the end are going to win us like the amount of revenue and client base we want for our next rounds of funding. It's really focused on usability, learner experience, platform experience, which is all stuff we can do beautifully with Bubble, and we are still tweaking, iterating, but that's all stuff that's fully within our kind of skill set and option set right now. There are some things on the midterm roadmap, things around potential integrations to our client systems, these sorts of things that we may find some limitations. That equally is a thing that where there is mature API documentation, often you still can do that stuff in Bubble, as you said, Vlad, we were doing from version 1 even. So there are things that we know that might be slightly tricky at points, but actually either you can decide to push that stuff back to later on in your journey, because the benefit of staying in no code for now is too strong to bother deviating, or indeed find workarounds that make it workable but not quite perfect for the time being, again to stay in no code as opposed to rebuilding the whole thing in code from scratch basically.
Right. So to kind of continue on that question, what are the biggest challenges for you right now? Are they technical or are they more business related, or maybe a mixture of both? So in terms of the, let's say, the near term planning, like the next 6 months, how are they looking for you? What are the things that you're tackling the most?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost bizarrely, it's I'd say the biggest focus right now is all business and commercial. Like the product's in a great place. The client feedback now is fantastic. Yes, we've got a few tweaks and things in the near-term roadmap, but nothing substantial at all.
Awesome.
Most of our focus and challenges are really around like customer acquisition, onboarding experiences, these sorts of things that aren't really Bubble related. They're much more how we actually work with our clients related. And that's coming from someone who comes from a B2B sales background. So that's even like having done this stuff for a while, that's still our focus now as a company to really optimize, which gives me confidence that our product's already in a place where, yeah, it's going pretty well on that front. I'd say it's not even a big priority just now.
That's awesome. That's exactly the mentality that I think a lot of people are need to realize. Then, you know, definitely building a product is a challenge of itself, right? It's hard to get started. It's hard to guess and then get to the point where people are actually happy with your product, and it's never done. So you always have something to improve and something to tweak, but pretty quickly it's all coming back to whether you're adding the right, you know, value, whether you're targeting the right audience, whether your business acquisition and growth plan is tangible enough, and you know, it has enough traction and things like that. So it's you know, something that a lot of technical founders, let's say people coming from more of a design and development experience, don't really think a lot about, but they should. So it's definitely you said exactly that. So the product is in a place where there's definitely a lot of things that you are going to be trying with and iterating with. It's almost you know, secondary to how the business is actually going from here. So which is a good problem to have, I assume. So definitely one less thing to worry about, a little less for now at least. Great, a couple more questions from the audience. Thanks for all the insights, Chris. And 2 questions here. So how much time did it actually take you from building the first version to actually getting funding? So let's say from the moment it was built to the moment when you were pitching and then getting the funding confirmed.
Yeah, I'd say kind of rough timelines. So as we got near completion of V1, we started the outreach process to get our first conversations with potential customers going. And there's always a bit of a lag time there. If you start outreach today, you'll probably have your first intro calls in 2 weeks' time, your first kind of like testing your product, maybe another 3 or 4 weeks after that. So there's no need to wait till the product's ready to start the outreach process, because you can kind of run both in tandem. So yeah, I think we kind of first version, let's say that's sort of month 0 that launched. First kind of user feedback comes 4 weeks later, roughly, and over the next few weeks, iterations, improvements, incorporation of video comes very quickly afterwards, because we realized that text alone is obviously not engaging. Overall, about 7 or 8 months from V1 to first funding round closed. And in that time, we were both still employed elsewhere in parts as well. So yeah, not too long.
Pretty cool. Yeah, it's like 6 to 8 months on average, which is a very, very reasonable timeline, considering that you probably went through a few of the different options before you chose something you wanna go with moving forward. Pretty good. And another question, also in retrospect, what would you do with Bubble development differently now, being where you are and knowing where you are compared to what you did before? So what would change to your overall development strategy, I would say?
To be honest, in terms of development strategy, not much. I would say the level of quality product we built from the start will be much higher, obviously, particularly now knowing I guess a lot of the kind of most technical or most high level things I know now are mostly learned from Vlad and team, actually. The kind of like absolute the kind of like really detailed edges that let you do like really high performance stuff. To be honest, we go the same route of like problem space, needs, solution, but the first version wouldn't have been sending some text messages, that's for sure. It would be much better than that. So probably the same process, just a much better technical solution and product earlier on, basically, which is not a very helpful answer, sorry.
Well, actually, I think it helps to kind of stress the point that your progression was probably the best kind of a learning curve that there could have been for early stage founder building on no code, meaning get the first version of the application together yourself, regardless of how potentially better it could have been, and then when you're actually familiar enough with the environment and then the tools, that then actually start reaching out to people, which will help to take it to the next level. So even if you'll scratch and redo it, the whole thing from the ground up, you will still be in a much better place in terms of understanding where you need to go, why certain solutions are being done exactly the way they are, and overall just being much more comfortable understanding where the process is and why things are being done the way they're being done. So I'm guessing that I would agree that that wouldn't be a radical shift to the optimal, let's say, growth of and build your product. So good stuff. Another question about the product architecture, and probably something that is on your radar. Have customers raised concerns about using Bubble, or do they even know that you're using Bubble? And what about data privacy? What do you think about that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, so some do, some don't. We don't hide it particularly, but it's not a thing that's particularly unnecessarily brought up, basically. But as far as the customer experience is concerned, like, what does your customer care about in the end? For us, they've got a problem they want to solve. They try our solution, and the experience they get as a learner, and they love it, and they want to see how they could build content and courses and actually operationalize it. Every step in that process is kind of irrelevant of where it's hosted or what it's hosted on, as long as the actual delivery of the thing they want is there, right? Things like data privacy, very good question. That's stuff that I used to work at a kind of a machine learning and cybersecurity company. So cybersecurity and data privacy is a big topic there, at least. But really good question. But thankfully, the same as if you were to build your stack in code and host data with AWS, everyone's relying on third-party suppliers, right? It's not as if that's something that's unique to Bubble, not even close to it. And Bubble has all the data privacy agreements that are GDPR and the California version required, etc., in place. Yes, you need to make sure your T's and C's and your own data processing agreements are all drafted sort of fairly well at least, but there's little difference to hosting with Bubble versus anything else, because the same as you would have your data stored with AWS and using other suppliers in your stack, it's just another supplier in the end.
Yeah, you're right. A great point about the actual value for the customers is kind of very similar to the answer about whether VCs would be concerned about using Bubble or not. Probably some will be, right? But as long as you're able to demonstrate the value and the potential for growth, they shouldn't really care. And the customers and the end users care even less. If the application actually works, if it takes care of their need, if it relieves their pain, I don't think they are particularly concerned whether it's Bubble, Webflow, Java, or whatnot. I mean, we're only concerned about that because we are kind of in the space, and we know that, okay, this is a no-code tool, which we're kind of subconsciously looking for a catch, I think. But ask yourself, do you know what stack was used to develop pretty much any application that's currently on your smartphone or any website that you're using at least somewhat frequently? You don't know, and you don't care, because as long as it works, it works. So it's the same with Bubble. The only people who are wondering whether there's a drawback of using Bubble are people who are familiar with it, and they want to build something with it themselves. So relax, people. I think as long as you deliver the quality solutions and address people's concerns, they don't really care, which is definitely exactly Chris's opinion, and I couldn't agree more with that. So Chris, is there anything that people can help you with, that the no-code audience that we are working with can be helpful with? Where can people find you, maybe to talk to you, talk about your solution, maybe promote it with their networks? And maybe, I don't know, maybe you're looking for talent and you would be interested in talking to people that may be helpful to you on the Mars journey. How do people talk to you, and what are you looking for in particular at this stage?
Yeah, sure. So LinkedIn is probably my best place social media wise. I'm new to Twitter, so don't use that too much just yet. But LinkedIn is probably the best place. Chris Mansfield, if you want to connect at all. In terms of what next for us, I suppose we just have made all our kind of core hires now. We've got one more person joining our content team. So on the kind of talent side, thankfully, well covered for the next kind of at least 9-12 months. I think as far as the no-code community is concerned, keep pushing the boundaries, find the things that can't be done currently and need to be done, because that's the stuff that feeds back to the product roadmaps of suppliers like Bubble, who obviously provide us with the tools. So buy-in and excitement is what I ask, please, if that's okay.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's actually something that is a major differentiating factor in the no-code community, and Bubble in particular, that everybody wants everyone to succeed, really, because every particular success, regardless of how big or small it is, kind of pushes the needle for the whole community forward. So the more successful companies out there, like GoodCourse, the better the overall perception and the awareness about the potential of no-code is. So that's why I guess the people in the forums or otherwise in a network of no-code are so helpful and so basically game-changing or uplifting as compared to pretty much any other development community or network that I have ever stumbled upon, because everyone is genuinely interested in your success. And I think it's not necessarily limited to the actual tech part of things. I'm sure I've been a part of a lot of conversations, and I've seen a lot of them on the forums, people talking about pure business things, so how to position yourself better, how to promote yourself better. I don't know, Chris, if that was your experience or not, but people are basically ready to help with pretty much anything that could help everyone succeed. So with that being said, I think, Chris, your story and yours in the Mars journey is definitely going to be very helpful for people who are thinking of whether or not the no-code is the way, whether or not their idea could benefit from using a template, whether or not they're good enough to getting a VC funding, and what's next, and what are the skills necessary to take the product to the next level. So I think there has been a lot of great insights. We'll be sharing a lot of those with the people from our community. We'll also be posting this on YouTube for people to stop by and check it out a little later. Yeah, reach out to Chris on LinkedIn. He's posting a lot of good stuff in there. Probably he's the most informative person in my LinkedIn network. So I definitely highly recommend to subscribe to Chris's updates and insights about the learning market and then GoodCourse in particular. I thank you very much for your time, Chris. Big hello to Omar. And we're hoping to talk to you in around a year from now when you've raised your next series and you're at a totally different level and you're sharing more gems of insights about building stuff for people using no code and then sharing the details of that journey.
Perfect. Thanks, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone. And you have a wonderful day and talk to you all soon.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.